that's when it dawned on me. I mean, these people were friendly. They were smiling. We got off the plane and it was a great atmosphere. And same way in Okinawa, the people were very friendly. And then it dawned on me that stop number 3 at Vietnam. And stop number 3 means I'm going to be killing these people. These are the very same people I'm looking at that are smiling and are happy people. And I'm going to be killing them. You know, started the wheels grind that.
You today for the interview. Eddie. Okay. Eddie, you were born in Topeka, Kansas. Can you tell me what life is like for you and what went on before you went into the military?
Well, life was, that's pretty simple. It was just growing up with 7 sisters and 2 brothers and, you know, learning to get along with one another and having friends and schoolmates. And uh, life was just a learning experience.
What did your father do for a living?
My father was a corpsman welder for the Santa Fe Railroad Shops here in Topeka.
What are some things about your father that you remember during that time? What were some of his qualities that growing up?
Well, I guess you could say the first thing that I can remember about my father is being afraid of it. I mean, my father was a muscular person. He wasn't tall, but he was short, stocky, and he was muscular, and he had the type of voice that was like a commanding voice. And so there was that element of respect for him, just by his presence. But as I began to grow, I found that he was a very complex man. But he had a sensitivity about him uh, that was sort of at odds with his demeanor because he looked so frightening as a child to me. Looking at him as a grown man, he looked so frightening, and yet he was so gentle and compassionate.
And your mom, she sounds like a real sort of soul.
Mom ran the ship, so to speak. Mom was always opinionated, and uh, you know, mom ran the household.
And she was active, as well as having 10 kids, she was active in the community.
Yeah, she was active in the NAACP. She was active in other programs that like the welfare system and things like that are helping uh, uh, people in the community.
Mm. You mentioned that your mother was a great teacher.
Yes, mainly because I can recall from the earliest days um, sitting around in the living room or in the bedroom, and mother would always read out of the Bible and told us fascinating stories out of the Bible, and it just the way that she would tell it just kept your attention there. It just kept focused on it. You just wanted to learn more and more. You wanted to hear more and more, and I think that started me out as far as always having that thirst for knowledge.
How was your father in the military?
Yes, my father served in World War II, in both theaters, in the European theater and the Asian theater.
What branch in the
He
service?
was in the United States Army, and he was in the quartermaster units. They were in North Africa, and then of course, then they went on into Italy, Europe, and then after World War down, their unit was transferred to the Pacific Theater.
Oh, your dad was decorated.
Yes.
Um, special, the special awards or
I don't know. I mean, he had the different decorations of, I guess, campaign ribbons and all that, but he did have in his, on his, 8214, he had 4, uh, medal, well, the way it's listed on DD 214 is, uh, not Medal of Honor, but honor medals. I'm not sure if there's the difference between them, but he had 4 of those medals on his papers.
okay. Now where did you fall in line of all these children?
I'm the third in the line. I have two sisters above me, but I'm the first son.
And how was school for you? High school?
Uh, well, I didn't take high school serious enough. High school was still a lot of fun. It was being around with your friends and the sports. That was the main thing: playing football, basketball, wrestling, those type of things. But I didn't take my general subjects as uh, I didn't take it to heart like I should have. There were certain subjects I did, geography and history, I did, but I didn't apply myself when it came to English and some of those subjects.
Now, did you have a part-time job growing up?
Oh, I've worked since I when I can't remember how far back ago, and I threw newspapers, I delivered telegrams on a bicycle. I mean, I was working when I was a young kid.
Mm. Did you save up and buy a car or something at one time? Or
Yeah, that I was headstrong back then. I was tired of riding a bicycle all the time, and my cousins that were older than me, they had vehicles, they had cars, and I guess every boy's little dream is to have yourself a car. So I decided I'd save up my money and buy me a car, and I bought my first car when I believe I was 14, 13 or 14, and the car cost me $90. It was a 1955 Ford Custom, and I paid cash, and I hit the $100 for my first car, but I couldn't take it home. I had to park it down the street because the mother would kill me if she saw
um, when year did you graduate from high school?
it. In 1967, May of 1967.
Okay, and the Vietnam War was in progress.
It was already in progress.
Yes. What were your as you were getting ready to graduate, how did you feel about that? Or what was the sentiment that was going on, and how did you end up in the military?
Well, first I didn't think anything about it because it was way away. I mean, it was something you were reading about in the newspaper, but it wasn't something that really impacted your life. And it didn't really dawn on me until my cousins went in to the Marine Corps before I did. And then hearing, when they would come home on leave and listening to the things that they were saying, then after one of them actually went to Vietnam, and when he come back, that's when I started realizing that this thing is not, even though it's way away from home, it's impacting, you know.
So how did you and your friends how did you deal with the fact that this was a possibility when you graduated that you
Well, we talked about it as far as, you know, the draft. They would talk about, implementing a draft and that type of thing. And so we were all talking about, well, what's going to happen? We get drafted. Are you going to go? Are you going to go to college? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? Uh, Everybody had their opinions, but my way of thinking was, well, I didn't want to get it over with, and so I decided the best thing for me to do is to end it volunteer, and I wanted to have some type of say so about what was going to happen with me. I didn't just want to be drafted and then they put me where they want to put me and all that. I wanted to have a little say so.
So how did you decide on the Marine Corps?
Well, that was, you got to remember, I was still 17 years old. I was stupid. I thought I was smart, but I was stupid because I don't like flying. So, I had already eliminated the Air Force. I can't swim, but at the time I couldn't swim. So the Navy was already crossed off. That only left the Marine Corps and the Army. My dad had served in the Army, but the things that I was hearing about the Marine Corps made them stand out. They were separated because they seemed to be a force that took care of them all. I mean, uh, you meant something to them. You just wasn't a number. And since they're a smaller fighting force, I just felt that was more of a family setting, as far as taking care of one another. So I decided the Marine Corps, and it wasn't until years later, I did dawn on me at 17 years old, looking at the globe, eagle, and anchor, that signifies everything. And that signifies being in the air, it signifies being in water and on the land. But at 17 years old, all I could see was them on the lands.
Hmm. So when did you enlist?
I enlisted in June of 1967.
And that was right after you graduated. How now, how were your parents about this? You were the third of the oldest?
Yes.
Okay. And were you the first son?
First, sorry.
Yeah, okay. How were your parents? How did they feel? How did you tell them that you had decided to enlist?
Well, I did it before I told her.
Oh,
I mean, we had talks about what was going on in Vietnam. My dad was neutral. He just was silent about the whole issue. He didn't want to talk about it. My mom, she was vocal, and she said no. You know, that's a war we have no business being in, and she didn't want to be in it, involved in it, and she really didn't know what I was thinking. So she had no idea I was going to sign up. You know, that was something that came as a police shot in there when I did it.
well, did they have to sign for you?
Eventually, yeah, they did, but I mean, I had already went down to the recruiter and signed up. Then the recruiter had to go and, talk to my parents after I had done that. And then they did have to give the okay. And then my mother, she just kind of threw her hands up and said, well, if this is what he wants, experience is the best teacher.
Was there something else you said, something classic about when you're hard-headed or
Well, yeah,
you were
my mom always had that expression about, a hard head will make a soft behind.
oh, I thought it was something about bump the stump.
Yeah, and same thing. She said, if you won't listen, then you just bump the stump, And she said maybe this will be something that'll make a man out of you. It'll teach you some things. So she said, this is what you're asking for. So I'm like, give you what you're asking for. So she paid this, and then he'll sign the papers for me to go
So in June, you took the train to San Francisco where you were with some
to San Diego.
Oh, okay. Did you meet some Topeka?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or tell about leaving for
Well, when we met, they had decided to get everybody together, and they stayed us all. Uh, I believe it was like at a YMCA building in Kansas City, and then we would catch the train out of Kansas City to go out to California. Uh, the thing that I remember most about that was we were just, like I said, 17-year-old kids. And to us, it was like an adventure. We were just having fun. We were out of Topeka. We were just having fun, horsing around, and, doing those silly little things like pillow fights, go from room to room, pillow fight, so that kind of thing. And what stuck out in my mind about that was we had not yet been exposed to what I call the real world, real people, real, crime, uh, the type of things that go on in society that children don't even know about. And while we were doing these type of things, we had an incident where a man came into our room, and there was like three of us in the room, and he just walked right into our room because we had the door cracked because we were waiting on the other guys to come in to ambush him. And this man walked into our room, and no, we're just 17-year-old kids. We don't know what's he doing in here. And he walked up, and he says, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I told him, "You're in the wrong room. You need to leave." And my buddy Patrick was laying over and he was trying to scream. His mouth was open, but he wasn't saying nothing. But he was scared and he was trying to scream. And I had taken a steak knife out of the restaurant that table we had ate, and I had the steak knife with me, and it was under my pillow. And when this man would not leave our room, then I fumbled around, so I was able to find that steak knife in my bed. And then I pulled steak knife out. I told him he had to leave the room or I was going to hurt him. And then he said, I'm not here. I don't want no violence. And then he backed out of our room. And we go through and lock the door after that. But that was quite a little experience for 17-year-olds.
So how did you find your basic training?
Well, once we got to, we rode the train to San Diego, and then they bused us to the recruit train facility. And then that's when the nightmare began.
Oh, okay. Um, you met some close friends somewhere along the way here, didn't you?
Well, we all got assigned, to the same platoon. So the guys that I left Topeka with, Larry Patrick, Larry Wonder, Paul Miller, we all ended up in the same platoon, recruit platoon. So I knew these guys. We had horsed around, all the way down there. So we kind of knew each other. And then when we got down there and we would start going through the nightmare, it was the thing that was happening to one of us that would either be comical to the other guy or, or tragic, whatever, because we were like friends by then. So what happened to one happened to all of us, so to speak.
What did your training consist of to prepare you to go overseas?
Well, in boot camp, it wasn't training to prepare you to go overseas. That training is prepared to indoctrinate you into a different way of life. It is to, in my opinion, it is to mold you into what the military wants you to be. And in doing so, sometimes they have to break your spirit in order to make you into what they want you to be. That was my problem. I did not want my spirit broken. I'm going to be me. No matter what facet of life I'm in, I'm still going to be Eddie Young. And that's where I started having my problems in the military. Because you need to conform, you become a part of a team, but you lose identity, you lose individuality. And I wasn't ready to get that up.
Throughout your training, basic and then beyond, were there any instructors in particular that?
Yeah, we had 4 drill instructors, and I never forget them, and I remember their names. I mean, because they put us through living hell for how many weeks we were there. I remember 2 of them not so pleasantly. I remember one as a decent person, Sergeant Randall, was a decent individual. He was stern, and he stood about 6'5", and I mean, he scared the daylights out of you, but he wasn't sadistic. I mean, he was stern, but I don't know. You felt like you could trust it. Sergeant D was a Japanese or an Oriental drill instructor, and Sergeant D was the kind of person to where you didn't fear him physically, but you feared what he'd do to you. As for he knew ways of torturing. He knew ways of making you pay without putting his hands on you. And so we learned to, not get on the wrong side of Sergeant D, but Sergeant Harville, who was our black DI, and Sergeant Martinez, who was a Hispanic DI, they were sadistic. I mean, they seemed to take pleasure at causing pain. And sometimes it was, over things that were really small things, but they really would punish you.
Where were you when you got orders to go overseas? We're gonna get you overseas or
Well,
over into?
I was still in California because then from boot camp I went through basic training, or from basic to ITR, which is Infantry Training Regiment, which was then up at Camp Pendleton in California, and then that is where they began to, well, of course, we got put in our MOS back at boot camp. We got assigned what we would be back at boot camp. I wanted to be a truck driver or something like that. And that's where my friend Larry Wonder, he ended up in Motor T. And I was standing right next to him in the parade line. And when they called off his MOS, I was hoping mine was going to be the same. But then they called 311 infantryman. So I was taken to Camp Pendleton, and I went through my ITR training at Camp Pendleton to prepare us for going to Vietnam.
When did you actually leave Vietnam? I mean, where did you leave from?
Well, we actually left from El Toro, the Naval Air Station at El Toro, to fly us to Hawaii. I don't recall the actual date of when we actually departed.
Leaving the United States, what was that like for you, that flight over to Vietnam?
Well, like I said, we flew from El Toro to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to Okinawa. So that was my first time crossing a body of water, like what we'd had to cross the Pacific Ocean. I had never been out of the United States of America, so I'd never seen really foreign territory before. I had Oriental friends, but not very many. There was a few here and there when I was growing up. But then all of a sudden, from Hawaii to Okinawa, everybody's Oriental. I mean, the faces are the same. And then that's when it dawned on me. I mean, these people were friendly. They were smiling. We got off the plane and it was a great atmosphere. And same way in Okinawa, the people were very friendly. And then it dawned on me that stop number 3 at Vietnam. And stop number 3 means I'm going to be killing these people. These are the very same people I'm looking at that are smiling and are happy people. And I'm going to be killing them. Started the wheels grind that.
Where did you land in Vietnam?
We all landed in Da Nang, at the air base in Da Nang.
What was it like getting off the plane, and what do you remember about any of that?
Well, first thing I remember about landing in Da Nang was just before we got there, they come on the intercom and told us that when we were to disembark, we were going to have to get off the plane in a hurry because they were already taking incoming at the airfield. And we would get off the airplane as quickly as possible, get off the runway and find shelter, get in the bunker. And so when we touched down and they opened the doors, we could hear the explosions, and we had to get off the plane and get away from the plane, let that plane get off the runway before it got hit. So we come in under fire.
What did you do then? I mean, how did you know where to go? Or
I didn't. I just ran and got down like this. Shoot your head down and find something to get behind, to get under, just hide. So that's what you did.
so when that was over, when that incoming was over, what did you
Well, they
form together and find out where you were going, or how did it?
Yeah, after that was over, then they got us mustered up and got us over to a central tent, headquarter tent, where the new replacements were coming in, so we could get our assignments to what part of the country we would be serving here.
And what was your assignment?
Well, they assigned me to I Corps, which was up on the DMZ, and the base camp up there at the time was called Dong Ha. So that was my flight, was to fly out of Da Nang to Phu Bai, and then from Phu Bai to then be choppered out of Phu Bai up to Da Ha.
What was it like when you got to? It's Dong Ha.
Dong Ha.
Okay, what was it like there?
It was just a base camp. It was an area where they had cleared the jungle out and basically built a perimeter, and it was our base camp. And that was a staging area for all the operations that were going on up on the DMZ.
So where did you meet up with the people you were going to deal with?
I didn't. We were replacements for those that had got killed, and so we were coming in 2 by 2, 3 by, just whatever was necessary, how many men they needed to replace those that were killed. That's how we went up there. I didn't go up there with any friends or anybody I knew. They just if they needed 5 fresh bodies, they got 5 fresh bodies to bring you in to replace those that were killed.
So eventually, what did?
Well, then at Dong Ha, then you got assigned to your company. And at the time, the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines were operating alongside of the 9th Marines and some other units. But Dong Ha was where you officially got put into your company. And then, since our company was in the field, then the next time the Jeep was going out into the field or whatever, or they were choppering stuff out to the field, then they took you out to the field to the unit that you were going to be assigned.
Okay, when you got to that unit, what did you do, and what was that like? What do you remember about it?
Well, it was combat. I mean, you were choppered into to where the men were bivouacking in the jungle, and you got in there, and then they told you which squad you were going to be in, and you found out who your squad leader was, and then eventually you found out names of the people higher up. And
What was a day like for you? Describe.
it was a nightmare. It was like having a bad dream and can't wake up out of it. I mean, it was killing going on. It was death around you. It wasn't anything that you prepared for. I mean, all the preparation that you did before you went over there, it was more than what our preparation was.
So you were sleeping in the jungle then, or
Oh yeah, we lived in the jungle. That's what I'm saying. The base camp was just a staging area. We were patrolling and doing ambushes, and we lived in the jungle.
how did you patrol? What did you personally do, like on a patrol, or what were you
Well,
about?
the object is to engage the enemy. And the object is to try to find the enemy, uh, and do away with. I mean, that's the bottom line.
What were some times that you remember, incidences that you remember trying to in doing this?
Well, I mean, when I first got there, I'm I guess I'm like a lost puppy. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm following orders. I'm doing what everybody else is doing. I'm taking orders. When someone says to go do this or that, that's what I'm doing. Uh, when the shooting started, I didn't really know what to do other than get down. I mean, I knew enough to get down and 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 get behind something to try to protect yourself. But as far as what was going on, as far as the overall scheme of what was happening out there, you had no idea.
What do you remember about your first firefight or any of them? What was that like for you?
Okay, the first thing I recall was I didn't like the helicopter the Marine Corps used. We flew in on twin blade helicopters. They were the large helicopters that had the twin blades at the front and the back, and they looked nice and they seemed to be reliable. When we started getting choppered in and out of the LZs, we were choppered in with these smaller one blade helicopters that had a little small blade on the back. And to me, it looked like a giant locust. I mean, they didn't seem sturdy to me. They didn't look like I didn't even think they could fly. And we were riding on these things in and out of the LZs, and so we airlifted in, and the first firefight that I recall, I was lost. I mean, I was like, when the shooting started, I know, you can't see anything. You're in the jungle, and then you just start returning fire from where the fire is coming, but you really don't see anything. And so I my curiosity got the better of me. I was trying to see what was going on. So I looked up to see, well, what is going on? Who's shooting? What's going on? And they're all telling you, get your head down, you dumb, so and so, before you get killed. And but I was just trying to find out what was going on. And I recall in that particular firefight, uh, and people say, I guess you could say I saw the impossible. You're not supposed to be able to see a bullet shot at you. But like I said, I had already prayed to God. I'd already asked God for a particular thing, and that was, I just said, after meeting these people in Okinawa and Hawaii, I didn't have anything against Oriental people, and I wasn't worried about myself, what would happen to me. I knew God could take care of me, but I didn't want to hurt those people. And so my prayer to the Almighty was, keep me from hurting them. I don't want to know when we get in the firefight. I don't want to know that I killed anybody. And I don't want to have to face someone one-on-one and have to take his life. So, that was my perspective on fighting. But, I was doing stupid things, jump because of curiosity, looking around trying to see what was going on. Uh, and I saw the bullet. And it was coming right at, and it was like a little small dot. It looks like a pinwheel, like it was going around like a pinwheel. And I looked, and I said, and I thought, duck your head. And I just dropped my head, and it went right over my helmet and hit the bush behind me. And then when I told another Marine about it, he said, well, you're crazy because you can't see a bullet that's fired at you. I said, I know what I saw, but I think that was the Almighty reassuring me that he was protecting me, because in my mind, he had told me, I'm going to allow you to see a lot of danger, a lot of killing, and a lot of hell, but nothing will happen. And I believe in my mind that that's what he told me. And then I had no fear, because I wasn't afraid of my own personal safety at that time. I knew he would take care of it, no matter what happened out there.
What went on to happen with you? What all else did you?
Well, when we were at Cam Low, uh, that's the first time where I guess you could say the horrors of war really touched me personally because we were camped there at Cam Low and we were running ambushes and patrols, and then we come back to the base camp. But while we were back at the base camp, basically what you're doing is, cleaning your ammo, your gear, resting for the next patrol or the next ambush you're going to go on. But we had a lieutenant that thought it was stateside. He was not satisfied with you bivouacked and resting. He wanted to see you doing things. So, you know, he told us to get up and go out and police the area, which is pick up paper, clean up the area. But we're in a jumper and we're at a base camp. And my philosophy was, I don't care what kind of paper's out there laying around out there on the ground. What is that got to do with us? But he wanted to see us up doing things. So he told us to get up doing it, and I wasn't getting up. I said, I'm resting. We just come back in off of patrol. I'm getting my rest. I'm cleaning my gear and stuff. The hell with your pick up the paper. I'm not going to. My bunk buddy that shared the funker with me, he got up to go, and I told him, don't go out there. I said, let the paper stand. We don't care. But he said, no. He said, the lieutenant said, ready to go do it. I'm going to do it. I said, okay. Well, when they got out there and started policing the area, we took incoming. And those guys were too far out on the perimeter to get back to safety. And Rito was killed. Not by combat. I mean, not defending his life. He's out there picking up paper and lost his life. And, I don't hate people, but at that moment, I hated that lieutenant because he cost that man his life needlessly. It's one thing to die in battle, and you can accept that. I mean, that's hard enough watching your friend die in battle with you. But there's a cause. I mean, there's a reason. But there was a reason for that battle. That was a life waste.
What did you go on to do then? It was something very important.
Well, we moved from there up to Jolen. And I remember Jolen because after I got back, my mother told me things about Jolen. I didn't realize that these things were being reported, back home to people on television sets. But families were remembering certain names of villages, and when you would write home in a letter, you say, well, Mom, I'm in Jolen or whatever, they knew these things. So when the TV came on, they saw these things, then they knew what my son did. And Jolen was special for me because when we would go out and patrol, we would go through the villages. And, of course, the kids would come out and flock around you, and they would try to talk to you. And I'm from a big family, so I love kids. And so I would play with the kids, talk to the kids, and I kind of like that little following. And they would always come and, walk with me as we were going back through the village, going back to uh, our compound. Well, at Jolen, we had a trash dump, and it was away from the compound, but we had to guard the trash dump because the little kids like to come out to the trash dump and rummage through it, find food and little trinkets and things like that. Well, they were afraid the kids would get in there and somebody would get hurt. So they made us go out there and stand guard duty and keep the kids out of the trash dump. Well, when it was my turn to stand guard duty, I didn't let them get in the trash dump, but I would go myself in there. And if I saw a can of peaches or pound cake or something in there, and they wanted, I'd get it for them, take it out and hand it to them. And so they would sit around and they would teach me how to speak Vietnamese, and I got a little following there. And on one occasion, we took a lot of incoming there, and I mean, they were hitting us hard and hitting key places. And one day I was at the trash dump, and the little boy told me there was a South Vietnamese soldier walking into the compound. And the little boy pointed at him, and he says, VC. And I said, oh, no. I said, that's not VC. That's so-and-so. He's a South Vietnamese officer. We know who he is. He said, no, VC. Well, when the kid said that, then I thought, well, let me look at him. Let me check this guy out. So I started watching this individual, and I saw him pacing distances from the command bunker to the ammo bunker to the flagpole, and he was spotty for the artillery. So the next day when we took incoming and those particular places got hit, then I went to the lieutenant, our first lieutenant. I told him his name was Lieutenant Place, and I told him what this child had told me. I said, and I personally watched this man count his steps. I said, and I guarantee you, that man is a double agent or something's going on here. So then they decided to watch it, and then they found out, yes, that he was, and they arrested him. And because of that, then the lieutenant came to me and he says, "You have such a way with the children, and everything." He says, "Have you heard about the new program we're starting out? Yeah, it's called the Combined Action Group, where we take 14 Marines and a corpsman and put them in villages, and they actually live with people in those villages, protect the villages, and do civic action and those type of things." He said, "You just really seem fitted for that type of work." He said, "The only problem is it's an all-volunteer unit because the dangers are you're not going to have a company of men. You're not going to have security. It's just 14 of you out there." And he said, "So you have to volunteer for that type of service." And I told him, "Well, I would volunteer because that I wanted to be helping the children. I wanted to be helping the village people. And that was something I could do." I enlisted for the Combined Action Group, and they took us to Fubai. That's where we were headquartered. And I was assigned to a Combined Action Group. And we lived in the villages and took care of the villagers, did civic action projects, things of that nature. And of course, Mom would send me little care packages, which or have gum in it, knickknacks, things like that, and I'd pass it out to the kids, and I'd give them these little treats, and they loved that. So uh, I really felt good in the village. I mean, I sort of felt at home because I was around these children and the older people. She did things for them, and I don't know. It was a rather than just killing people, you were actually affecting their lives in a positive way. And I enjoyed that. And then we had one incident that happened while I was in the Combined Action Group where a little child was hurt. Water buffalo stepped on a landmine and the child was there with the water buffalo and she was hit with the shroud on. And we heard the whole village wailing. And we ran to see what was happening in the village. And Papa's son had his daughter, she maybe 6, 7 years old, in his arms, and he was just crying and wailing, and blood all over him and her. So we grabbed the girl. We knew she was hurt. And we grabbed the girl and we started back toward our compound with her. And I told my radio man, Martinez, to get on the radio and call in medevac job. So we get that girl some help. When we got back to the LZ with the girl, the person that on the chopper said we could put the girl on the chopper. We said, "This girl is going to die if we don't get her to a hospital. Now get her on the chopper." And he said, "This chopper is a medevac chopper and it's for American personnel only." I said, "The Vietnamese speak." And I said, "Well, this time, this one's going to take this little girl." And he said, "No, we're not." And I did something I shouldn't have did, but I did it anyway. I pulled my 45 out and I stuck the 45 up to his head and I told him, "This girl's getting on the chopper. And we're going to save this girl fight. If this girl has to die today, you die, I die, we all will die with her today." I said, "Now you make the choice." They put her on the chopper. They got her to a hospital. It saved the girl's life. And she came back to the village. And I think that one action, though maybe how wrong, that action endeared us to that village and to those people because that's what those people know. They don't know about what you're fighting about in ideology. They know how you treat them, what you do for them. That's what they relate to.
With that incident, what became of the incident?
Well, nothing became an incident. I got transferred out of that unit. I got sent to another unit for doing that and told, "Don't let this happen again." And of course, it happened again. And but that's just the way I am. I believe in right, doing what's right. And sometimes doing what's right is not what's popular. But I do what God tells me to do with it. if it's right, I do it.
Did you have an R&R at any time?
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about R&R. That's a time where you just go out and let your hair down and act a fool, but there's plenty of that. I'm at the Bangkok, Thailand.
And then you went back to the jungle? Or what happened after your R&R?
Yeah, I took my R&R late during my tour because I didn't want to leave the war zone and then have to come back to it and be in there a long time. I wanted to kind of like get away from it a little bit, but come back and have a short time and then get out of there. So I took my R&R late, and then when I came back, I went back out in the field. But then when I got short, as we call it, when you're ready to rotate, they messed up the order and they sent the wrong person home.
Oh.
And so I was stuck out in the field, and everybody knows their arrival date, so you know your departure date. And my departure date came and went, and nobody come out there to get me. So they sent us on an operation with the first cab, Army cab, helping them go through this area that they were going to sweep through. So we're out there, and they had me walking point of all things. So I'm out here walking point, and I'm short. So I said, wait a minute. When we stopped and took a break, I decided this is as far as you go. So when they got ready to roll again, I'm still sitting there. And then captain come over and said, let's go, Marine, we're ready to go. And I told him, you guys go ahead. I said, this is my final point. I'm not going any further. And I explained to him why. And when I explained to him my rotation date, and he realized that I should have been rotated out, they called it and had a chopper come out there, get me out of the field and take you back to the rear. He said, that man has no business out here in the field when he should have been rotated back to the rear and sent home already. So luckily they got me out of that operation and got me back to rear.
What was it like coming home, Kitty? You.
Well, it was an individual thing. There was you came home, and other than your family being at the bus station or the train station to pick you up or whatever, that was about it. No one knew you from the man in the moon, other than if you had your uniform on. Well, they recognized that you were a soldier. But there was no fanfare. There was no, I don't know, there was no respect. There was no, we weren't treated like people who had just went out, laid it out on the line for this country. We weren't treated like that. We were just, I don't know, just people that was just in the community.
How did you adjust then being back after having that experience?
I didn't have a real big problem adjusting because, like I said, I didn't live in fear over there. I sort of had a nice time over there because I knew God would protect me, and I just tried to do what was right. So when I got back home, it was glad to be back home, and I was around sisters and brothers and people that I knew. But at the same time, I missed my family in Vietnam because I left people that I had come to love.
What did you go on to do after you got back out of the military?
Well, after I got out of the military, I finally got into truck driving, which I wanted to do when I was in the military, but that opportunity didn't present itself. But I started out driving a cab, and then finally got to where I got a chance to go to truck driving school, and then come out and tried to be a truck driver. And then I had the unpleasant experience of finding out the problems we had in this country with getting employment and in certain types of employment that they didn't think you fit in into that certain type of employment. And so then that became another battle for me to break that and to move on with my life.
And you're still driving today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Today I basically own my own equipment, and I still run up down the road and deliver products. Like I said, I'm the kind of person to where I like to do things my way. Whether it be right or wrong, I do it my way because I'm responsible for what I do. Pictures of my father, Jesse Lee Young, and this is my mother, Blanche Hardy Young. This is an early picture of me when I was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 years old. after church, care for suit, so I'm taking my suit jacket off. Is a picture of our home that I was raised in from early childhood up till I left to go to the service. The third in line of a large family of 10 children. I'm the first boy and the third in line. Oldest sister, Venetia, she's a she's a chemist at the University of Florida. She is works for NASA in Houston. Kathy, she's in Houston, also works for a medical firm. Lori, works for IBM, Dallas, Texas. She works for IBM also. She's in Easton, served in the Air Force, and now he's worked for Continental Airlines. And he's in Houston also. Vanessa, she's wearing a little pajama that I sent to her when I was in Vietnam. She looked real cute in it. Their BB, she's named after my mom. Her name is Blanche. Age 18. Battalion 4th Marines in the 3rd Squad that I was assigned to at Dong Ha when I arrived in Vietnam. Photographs of my time in the village of Jolen. These are all my friends in the village. The children that I gave little knickknacks and gum and things to. These are all my little friends in that village. Here is a picture that's special to me. It's two of my friends in the Combined Action Group that I served with, Robert Martinez and John Garza, which we call Chief. And they, along with me, we were like brothers over there. Here, it may be strange to some people, but these women fought to protect their village, and they were fighting for us also. My family, my little kids that I enjoyed playing with, had a great time with. And this picture here is my last combat mission in Vietnam. I was supposed to have been going home. I was sitting out in the field. That's exactly what I did. I sat down right there. Myself and my wife and 3 of my daughters. This was taken back in the 70s, probably in 77, 78, somewhere along in there. And again, my daughter Angela, daughter Monica, my daughter Catherine, and my son Philip. Of my children and their families, Angela and her fiance Steve, the Monica and her husband Guy, and of course my daughter Catherine and my son Philip are in the picture. And there's Cameron, Adrian, my grandson back there is Jason, and Bo, and I have Sky, that's my granddaughter, and then that's Steve's daughter, Mackenzie, and Shauna. Sister Lori and her husband Bob, and their 2 children, Nikki and Corey. Uncle Albert, who served in the United States Army, and a picture of myself and my cousin Albert Jr., his son. Albert Jr. served in the Marine Corps. Would be my great-grandfather, Thomas Hardy. That's my mother's grandfather, who wrote. He's the one that wrote several books. He's prominent in England as a writer and a poet. Abilities from that side of the family. Corps uniform that when I was 17, 18 years old was issued to me, and I was about 135 pounds. I can no longer get into it at 195 pounds, but this is what I looked like when I was 17 and 18. The Veterans Project, I was honored Memorial Day with an article that was featuring veterans of wars for Memorial Day.
Feel today that your military service has affected your life and who you are?
Well, I would say that it's affected in 2 different ways, one positive and one negative. I believe positively, I was allowed to serve, and the camaraderie that you have with other soldiers doing the same job, you become like family with each other. And on the battlefield, you don't leave someone on the battlefield because they're your brother out there. And in that's the good of it, because it teaches us that we all have a common denominator, and that's humanity. The problem is resorting to war to get to a solution is where the problem is, because then it requires you to kill and maim one another, because the difference is that you can't iron out in a peaceful way. And it's against my beliefs, because, from what I read of the scriptures, there is only one being in the universe that has a right to declare war. Because when he declares war, he declares it in righteousness. And he is the only one that has the right and the authority to declare war. Man doesn't have that right or the authority. He just does it, but it's not justified, because his actions and his motives don't always agree. So I have a problem with war in that sense, because we shouldn't be, that should not be an option. And the way I feel, I grew up in a family where there were different complexions, there were different eye colors, there were different hair colors, and you learned to love one another. And you didn't see the differences in a negative; you saw them in positive. And to look at another human being, if you can't see yourself in another human being, there is what the problem is. No matter who you meet, when you meet them, if you can see yourself walking towards you, then you have the right attitude. Because what you do to another human being is akin to what you would do to God if he had the opportunity, because we're in his image. So we need to get past the diversities in a negative sense and see the positive, and realize that we're all children of God Almighty. And we don't have the right, other than in a sense of self-defense, to be taking another life. Fork tongue. It's the same thing. They say one thing and they do something different. And then they ask, well, why does everybody hate us? That's why, because you're not consistent. If you're going to say something, follow that plan of action. But don't say something and then turn around and do something altogether different. Don't tell Saddam Hussein and his people, well, you're mass murdering, thousands of Kurds, and then ignore the fact of what we did to the American Indian when they gave them blankets with smallpox. That's biochemical warfare, if you want to really look at it. Okay, when they say we want to root terrorism out, okay, but let's go across the board and do it everywhere. Don't go over there and say we got to get rid of Al Qaeda and we got to eliminate all these threats, and then allow the neo-Nazis, allow the Ku Klux Klan, and these organizations that their same agenda is all the same. It's hate. It's hate against another human being. That's the bottom line. So if you're going to root terrorism out, start at home and root it out here first. Then you go somewhere else and try to root it out. But don't tell them people you got to take care of their business for them. And we got the same thing going on in this country. We're hypocrites, and the whole world sees us as that. And I mean, America is slowly digging its own grave.
What can I ask you in this video that you want, that's important maybe for you to respond to? Some of the things, have you stayed in touch with people? If any of the other veterans, or have you been active in veterans organizations or anything like that? Those are, they're always curious about that. But also, the video is to learn what our veterans know, because you have been in harm's way, and we need to learn from that. So what can I ask you to help you put on tape what you want to have on tape?
Well, they don't want to hear what I want. What I do.
This is for you. This is, well, don't, this is,
I mean, as far as I recognize what they're doing, and they want to study and look at.
well, and it's to honor you. It's a chance for you to say what you want to say.
I want this country to honor its own people and stop the masquerade that's happening in this country. I mean, because any of the veterans that have served in war, we see government from a different point of view from what civilians see it. And government it's not always the people. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a government of the people and by the people. But this government's running amok.
I know that, I know how powerful these issues are for you. So I'm going to try and ask a question that you want to respond to. If I ask you, um, how do you feel about the military and the government today? How's that sound, Clayton?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's what I'll ask. And then you can have it response time. Okay. Eddie, how do you feel about the military and the government today? You're a veteran, and this is important for us to learn since you've been in harm's way. What you think?
Well, I feel this way about the military. I love the troops I serve with. We're all brothers and we're all family. And I believe that we learned on the battlefield what we haven't been able to learn in civilian society. And that is we're all the same. We're all brothers. And you didn't look at a man's complexion or anything about him before you pulled him off the battlefield. He was another Marine and you pulled him off the battlefield. And he do the same for you. And there's that camaraderie that you don't find in the civilian world, because when we come back here and there is no danger, we go back to normal life, as we call it, and then we start seeing each other in negatives instead of positive.
Have you kept in touch with any of the veterans?
I've kept in touch with several people that I served with. Larry Wonder, who I went to boot camp with, he's out in California. I have his phone number. I call him. I talk to him. Another fellow Marine that was from Fort Scott, Kansas. He's out in Las Vegas. I call him. I talk to him. I had the pleasure of finally finding Chief that I served with in the Combined Action Group. He's from San Antonio, Texas. And I was able to find him and meet him in person, and we talked after being separated for over 30-some-odd years.
Have you haven't been back to Vietnam, these children that you were involved with, did you ever have any contact again?
No, I've never been back to Vietnam. And if I could go back there, and if I could ever find any of them that were children back then, it would be great. I'd hug them, and it'd be like a family reunion again. My life, if I was to sum it up, would be a life of fighting against the odds. It would be a life of trying to right wrongs. And all the way from childhood, right on through military career, right on through my adult life, I have fought those type of battles. And it's just trying to help justice to prevail over injustice. And that's
To thank you for everything that you have done for this country. You have been a real inspiration, and knowing you and the things that are important to you are very powerful. And I want to thank you for being part of the Veterans History Project and continuing to serve and give by letting us know your thoughts and feelings.
okay. Well, I guess in summing it all up, what I would hope that this project does is, first off, see the commonality in all of us and respect the commonality in all of us. Secondly, and most importantly, I want this country to get back to its roots. I want this country to get back to serving God and honoring God in this nation and recognizing that He is the ultimate power and He is what sustains us. He has carried us to victory. We haven't done this on our own. And for us to think that our military might does this, we're fooling ourselves. God determined the outcome of battles. God determined who survives and who doesn't. And we need to wake up and get back to the things that this country was built on in the first place, and then work on taking care of those problems that we have among ourselves and recognize that we're all from the same family, and stop maiming, murdering, killing, and harming one another. It's like, if you want to look at it in its final analysis, How many of you would kill your own brother or your own sister? But that's what we're doing when we do it to each other in this country. We need to wake up.
Thank you, Unedited.
Well, thank you.
Hi, I'm a spokesperson for World War Heroes Chronicles. Every day we lose more veterans and the stories that shaped our world. Actors and movies aren't the real history. Our mission is to transform raw, aging archives into cinematic documentaries that rival Netflix while keeping the truth alive for future generations. To support the channel, you can become a digital librarian on our Patreon for just $5 a month. Your support directly funds the high-definition restoration of these rare records. In return, you'll get early access to our videos and entry to our research library of original archives and service histories. Help us save the next story at the link below.